Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning.
Yeah, I'm Abe.
Who am I? I'm Joe.
You're Joe.
I'm Joe.
You're still Joe.
And I have to tell people that this is KBOO 90.7 on your FM dial in Portland, Oregon. The number to call is 2318187. But before you start calling, we have guests.
Two of them, as a matter of fact.
Yes. Mary Fetsch is here. She's the TriMet media apologist. What do you want to call it? Power broker?
Just the spokesperson is just great.
Sorry.
No, it's great.
Spokesperson. And Carrie Ayers Panic.
Pellenuk.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
You're projecting, Joe.
That was totally off the wall. I really am sorry. Yeah,
your Freudian slip is showing.
You're in service planning for TriMet, right?
Correct, yes.
So what we have here today, folks, and this is unusual in that we don't have so many guests so often, is really a focused show on the question of TriMet, its situation, its future, and its plans, including what's been very publicized, potential rise in fares and cuts in service. And we're going to talk about all that, and we'll start by asking either of you or both of you to tell us what you're thinking you're going to be doing, and then we'll ask you why.
Well, I assume that's a professional question.
I hope so.
You know, it's we're an agency that moves a lot of people. You know, we move a small city every day. If you thought of 330,000 times a day somebody boards a bus, a train, that's a small city. It would actually be Oregon's second largest city if you could put that in population of a city. So we move a small city every day, and we're a very important service, obviously. We have a lot of what we call choice riders. I think it's really the system that says people have a choice of whether they drive or own a car, or even own two cars. I was talking to someone the other day, and they said, "Oh, we just gave up our other car, and I was just heading over to the TriMet, take the bus somewhere." You know, it's just this. If the transit system is comprehensive enough, you can make choices about how you're going to get around for a particular trip.
Well, I think that sort of gets to the nub of the problem. Yes, you are an important agency. Yes, the scope of your operations is vast, and I think that's why people are so disturbed at the prospect of these changes, at losing routes, at seeing the cost of their transit increasing.
Well, yeah, and
precisely because you are important.
Yeah, and I think specifically, before we go any further, you should tell us what you think is what TriMet thinks it needs to do and wants to do.
Well, by state law, we're required to have a balanced budget. We can't borrow for that. So right now we're facing a up to $17 million budget shortfall. And, you know, during this Great Recession, we've all had issues we've had to deal with in balancing our budgets. You know, a couple years ago, we had to cut $60 million. We had a $60 million shortfall. We cut 200 positions. We cut service. We raised fares. And, you know, did a lot of internal efficiencies. Non-union employees paid more for their health care benefits. They're in their fourth year of a salary freeze. So, you know, we've made a lot of the hard choices. When you think of TriMet's options to either cut or raise revenue, there's not a lot of options. There's increased fares, there's cuts, either internal efficiencies or to service. And those are really the two areas, you know, raise fares, cut costs, cut service. You know, so we don't have a lot of levers to pull when it comes time to needing to balance the budget. So those are the tough choices we're facing right now.
But you are still going ahead with the Gladstone expansion.
The Portland-Milwaukee line, it's the 6th MAX line. Those funds are not impacting the general fund. 96% of those funds are coming from somewhere else than TriMet. And in actuality, the light rail system is the best thing that ever happened to the bus system because the operating efficiency is so high on light rail that you actually have more revenue to be able to put towards the buses. So you need both. You need a good, strong bus system. You need a strong light rail system. When you think about Portland-Milwaukee, TriMet's portion of the $1.49 billion projects, you know, less than 5%. It's probably in the range of $40 to $50 million. That's quite a affordable deal if you think of us being able to expand the system, get a more efficient system. When you think about the cost per ride on Portland-Milwaukee, it's $1.50 a ride. Right now on buses, it's in the $2 range.
Well, that's really very interesting. Yeah.
So it really helps to the efficiency of the system.
Well, that's good. I think that you can continue to expand infrastructure even in the face of the budget crunch you're experiencing. Are those federal funds, like Recovery Act monies? Is that where that's coming from?
No, it's federal New Starts funds. So 50% comes from the federal government. We have $250 million in state lottery funds, back bonds. Metro's providing funds, the City of Portland, City of Milwaukee, Clackamas County, and TriMet. So when you think about all these projects, and it's been the history of our projects, is that TriMet's share is very little. We take on the operating elements of it, but we have partners who help expand the system. And when you think about what it adds to the streetscape and to that community and that neighborhood, it's truly an investment that that city or that jurisdiction is investing in that community. So, it makes sense to have all these multiple partners, and then we take on the operating. So it's a great way of, it's very purposeful how we've done this.
And those local and regional governments then have a say in, for example, where you're going to run the line and where the stops are going to be. So
correct.
It's very much a collaborative effort.
These projects take anywhere from 10 to 12 to 15 years to go from the idea stage to construction. And when you think about every jurisdiction along the way votes twice. They vote once to say what they call the locally preferred alternative, which is the alignment, and the mode, which is light rail, along this particular route. And so every jurisdiction votes on that, and then they come back and they vote on the funding. How are they going to provide their portion of the funding? So in a way, they kind of vote more than once on the project, if you will.
Okay. Go ahead.
Well, I want to focus in on, for the moment, exactly what the changes are and why these changes, why you or TriMet feels the changes are necessary in both the fare structure and the service structure.
Well, back to the area where we have a budget shortfall, up to $17 million. Part of the focus is on service cuts. Again, we have very few levers to push on where we can come up with revenues. The other thing about the fare structure, if you think, when you think about the zones, they were created back in '82. They really were focused at distance-based riders. So people coming from the suburbs, all the jobs were downtown. It made sense that that community who was traveling further, you kind of charge for that distance. The local community, where more of the low income and the minority communities were, they would have lower fares because they live close in, right? So fast forward to today, when you look at the dramatic demographic shifts, where the low-income and minority communities have so much moved out to the suburban areas, and they travel farther, transfer more. And so it's like, does it really make sense to have a fare structure when you think about the affluent inner city and the Pearl District and this and that why would you, it just seems like it's time to have a flat fare that treats it, sort of equalizes it all.
Well, what is the proposed flat fare?
The flat fare is $2.50 for a 2-hour trip in one direction. That means you could take your bus, get off, maybe, and you have time to, get a cup of coffee or something, take another bus. As long as you're traveling away from this destination where you purchased your fares, it works fine. So that's the idea.
Why the one-way element? I mean, why not just give somebody unlimited travel rights for 2 hours for $2.50?
Well, that's, I think, an interesting point you bring up. Obviously, we're still in the input phase here. We've been starting this budget conversation, if you will, since October. We've had open houses. We've had online survey where 4,800 people gave comments. So we're still in this phase of there is still time for public input to influence the final proposal. Soon, I would say about mid-March, we're going to come out with the next round. Basically, all the input we've had to date, basically about a particular route or fares or anything, will come out in a new proposal, because that input really does matter. We have a track record where we have always changed the proposals based on public comment. So that will come out soon, and that could be something. So the system was never intended for a round trip on a single fare. It was always just,
My name's Abe. This is the Abe and Joe Talk radio program on KBOO 90.7 FM. The number to call 503-231-8187. Today we have with us in studio Mary Fetsch and Carrie Ayers-Polinook from TriMet. We're talking about the proposed fare increases and service changes that the agency is contemplating. I would like to hear from those of you who depend on public transit to get around, and I want to hear what these changes will mean for you in terms of your bottom line and in terms of, for example, how long it's going to take you to get to work.
Yeah, and I don't want to ignore the question of reductions in service. It seems to me that one of the things you need to do in a good transit system is have the service frequent and comfortable, and of course reliable. And I'm very concerned if you reduce, for example, a line like number 8, which is one of your most populous lines, or even the ones that go way out to Heck and Gone.
Yeah, that's a very popular stop every now and then.
Heck and Gone, yeah, right.
A long time between buses, though.
Yeah, a long time between buses. It seems to me that you're losing the convenience and consequently the use eventually of that line by those very people who you're seeking to serve. It all connects up in ways that are threatening to the health of the system. And I also know that the economy is not exactly favoring anything right now. And I also know fuel costs have gone up, and I know we're going to talk about it a little bit, but there's issues around the way in which employees are compensated, and we'll talk about that a little bit. But I think, well, how could anyone who plans a transit system not know that there would be the likelihood, if not the certainty, of a sudden jump in fuel prices, given that you have no control unless you were to go into the futures market and buy huge amounts of fuel, which maybe TriMet did. I don't know. But, obviously that's going to be an issue. Obviously the healthcare issue has been an issue now for, it's occupied the consciousness of the American public politically. Even now, these clowns who debate on the Republican side seem to want to fight about that. So, I'm looking at these things and saying, well, how come, in the planning context, none of this was foreseen, or there was never any monies for it, or what's the deal?
Well, I think there's a couple things. Where we see our $17 million shortfall, we have it broken up in areas of where we think the impact is coming from. So we think, given what you're seeing in Washington, D.C. and in Congress, we expect about a $4 million cut in what they give us for preventive maintenance, our formula funds. So that's $4 million that we're anticipating we won't have. Now, if they give it to us, great, we can then focus that back in restoring service, that sort of thing. The other funds that pot, if you will, that's not performing as well as we liked it to, is the payroll tax. Obviously, with the economy, the payroll tax revenues are growing a small bit, but not growing as fast as needed. So we're anticipating $3 million less in this budget. So right there, that's $7 million. Then you get to the unresolved labor contract, where depending on how it turns out, it could be anywhere from $5 to $10 additional million that we need to come up with to deal with that. So we have to have a balanced budget. There are a lot of unknowns as we walk forward. We have to adopt our budget in June, so we're in February right now. So we have to make a lot of tough decisions now. Now, as things roll out, could we get a labor agreement between now and June? Could things change? So we're planning for the worst, and then we'll adjust as we can.
I have some specific my wish list, if you will, and I'll throw them out to you. My concerns about the situation. First of all, I do see the $2.50 fare as probably a necessity, and I'm suggesting that instead of having it go one way, that you simply have a 2-hour, let's say a 2-hour window for that $2.50. It seems to me that it would be revenue neutral if you think about it for a minute, because you're going to get more users out of that. And the definition of one direction is sort of, there's round trip. But if I was facing that, I would find a route around, I'd manipulate.
You're smart. You'd try and figure something out.
Well, I'd certainly try to figure something out. $2.50 is not a small sum of money for a lot of people. I also think that it's really important for the commercial interests in the city to keep what's left of Fairless Square, which you call
the free rail zone.
The free rail zone or whatever.
It used to be Fairless Square.
It used to be Fairless.
Well, I don't know how square it ever really was,
No,
but it
never
was pretty
square,
close.
but it was Fairless.
Yeah.
It had an arm.
And then had a
We'll call
dog
it-
leg up to
Yeah,
the Lloyd
it-
District.
It
dog
was
leg,
Fairless, and it did include buses at one time.
Yes, it did.
It did.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then there's the issue of school passes or the population of presumably limited income that use the system. And I think that's an incredibly important thing for two reasons. First of all, it makes it possible for people to go to school fairly cheaply, obviously. Secondly, it teaches the use of transit as a normative expectation. You got a younger population that are now getting used to using buses and trains, and that's got to be a good thing for the future of the outfit. The third thing that I talk about is my concerns are the elderly and the handicapped. I know you've already raised. I think you've raised the fare on those short buses for the people with physical challenges, and that's a population that really doesn't have the bucks, and are really dependent on public transportation. You know, people who are blind, people who have issues with their physical health, and so on. And that really concerns me. My fourth thing, which I'm going to throw out and we'll maybe get to talk about, is my favorite thing. I feel like a song. My favorite thing is trolley buses. I mean, I see them in San Francisco. I see them in Seattle. I see them in Vancouver. We used to have them here a long time ago, I think in the 40s and 50s. I like them. They have the advantage. You can have an express lane for them during the rush hours. They can manipulate through traffic because they are buses with independent wheels. There's no rails. They are electrically powered. Electricity is usually less expensive than diesel fuel or gasoline. They're very good on hills. If you have routes that are really locked in, like the 8, the 6, the 9. The Hollywood, etc. It makes sense. There's an initial investment in copper wire and poles and so on, but it makes sense to me to reuse those as part of the system. And I don't know that there's any comment one can make about that on your part, but I'm really disappointed that no one considers that anymore.
Portland, love it or leave it, man. If you want trolley buses, go back to California.
What? Okay. So now you two are really. I mean, I don't want to put you on the
You've
spot.
got a big long list here.
Well,
I don't even know where to start.
We
I
do
don't know
need to
which one
get to
start.
our callers also.
Oh, callers!
Yes, indeed.
We could do that. If you're just tuning in, this is the Abe and Joe Talk Radio Show. We have two very kind, so far, people from TriMet who are here to explain to us and to argue for TriMet's situation and for what changes need to be made there. So we would like it if you directed your comments not to Abe and I, but to our guests. I'm going to call you by first names. Is that all right?
Perfect.
I think that's Carrie and Mary. Carrie and Mary, that's cool. It could be a rock band. And
We'll work on that next
We
time.
could sing.
really. And
Oh, yeah.
there is no question that is out of bounds as long as it's really about the TriMet system. Don't bring up the war in Afghanistan, please. So let's start out.
I'll tell you what. Why don't we? Why don't we go to the phones,
Okay.
and then we can sort of work our way through your list as we go.
That seems fair.
All right. Who's up first? Mark. Good morning.
Good morning, folks. I have a couple of quick comments and a couple of questions.
Okay.
First, I've heard labor come up several times in a negative context, which is regarding their salaries or benefits. And so I'm not exactly sure how much management is being paid or your public relations people, but it seems like there's millions of dollars that could be saved by reducing salaries in that area. So I wish you would talk about your labor costs in terms of everything else. I don't see bus drivers as being overpaid and underworked. The other thing is, you're talking about either having to raise fees or cut services because that's the only sources of income you have. You actually serve a very large corporate community because most of these people who ride the buses in the mornings and afternoons during commute hours are going to and from work. And some of those large receivers of bus services, which would be the corporation, should be paying a tax or some kind of a transportation fee that would be appropriate for that. And you haven't talked about the abilities to tap into corporate coffers in a sense to help pay for the services you provide for them. In terms of annual passes, people who can afford an annual pass or even a monthly pass are those who are higher up on the rung, and perhaps you should eliminate those before you eliminate the bus or increase the bus fares. And I just want to have your comments on that and maybe get a chance to make one last comment as well.
Wow, I'll start with your number 3 first, your annual passes. So maybe you know that if somebody buys an annual pass, they actually get 1 month free. It's a discount, it's just like an incentive. So maybe, Mark, what you're thinking is take that incentive out, or, just basically allow people to buy 12 months for 12 months and such. So I hadn't heard that one before, so certainly an interesting idea. When you think about the companies and the corporations and such, more than half of our revenue comes from the employer payroll taxes. And we are limited by state statute as to the rate of that. And the corporations and companies and our firms and our business are paying quite a bit of money for the service. What they've said is, and this touches the labor issue, we have some of the best workers in the industry, and we've said it for a very long time. And our general manager, everyone knows that we have great employees. We couldn't do it without. It's a tough job. It is a very tough job. Not only do you have the traffic and just trying to get through, you also have to deliver really good customer service at the same time, and you never know when someone's going to jump off the sidewalk into the path, someone's going to cut you off, so you have to always are anticipating. It's a very stressful and it's a tough job. That said, it's really the contract that has been unresolved for several years now. It's really the union leadership that is the issue. Obviously, this contract and many of the benefits have been in place for 30 years. It took 30 years to get here. It took 2 parties to get here. It's going to take 2 parties to resolve it. We can't take 30 years to resolve this financially just because of the cost of it. So that's what we're trying to do. With bringing the health care benefits in line with other peers and other agencies.
What would that mean specifically, do you think?
Well, I'm not that privy to labor negotiations. I just know that the cost of the health care plan and the benefits that they have is, it's who would have known 10 years when the last contract was negotiated what health care costs would do. So way back in the day, this was a nice benefit. I think healthcare costs have doubled in the last 10 years, something like that. So when you think about it, I don't think anyone could foresee that. We know we want to have quality health care, but we also just need to bring them in line with others. These are some of the richest health benefits in the country, and we want to have quality health care for our employees. It's not about union versus management. This is about we need to come to the table and get a contract and have it where our employees are paid well and quality health care, but not at such a cost that we become a healthcare agency instead of a transit agency.
Specifically, is the copay too low? Is that the kind of thing that's concerning you? Obviously, it's outside the control of the agency to set the fees of the various insurance companies.
That's right.
You can't do a damn thing about that.
That's right. So when you think about average employee on the Blue Cross under the union plan is $22,000 a month per employee. Industry-wide and even excuse me, and even our non-union employees less than about half of that. So when you think about it, they have a $5 copay when they go to the doctor. There's no deductibles. There's no premium contribution. There's no co-insurance. And after 10 years, they have health care for life with just 10 years of service. So, and it goes on for retiree as well. So it's a very rich benefit. And if we were if it didn't cost so much and impact us so much, it wouldn't be as much of an issue. But, you look across what's happening across the country and other transit districts and everything and where our peer agencies are, we just need to come in line and be able to support our employees who do a great job at the same time having a sustainable financial benefit package. And that's what our board is, they have passed I don't know if it was a resolution or basically said you have to keep your cost increases in line with your revenues. So these are growing faster than that. So it's just a way of bringing it into balance.
So in this issue, in the larger context of the silly system we have in the United States for health care, is another example, I just have to say this, another example of why we need a national, some kind of a national health insurance
I was
plan.
just going to go there. Exactly.
Yeah,
Well, 2 comments, if I may.
Sure, go ahead.
Please, quickly.
Sure, is one, TriMet provides incredible services. I think you're one of the best public transit systems in the United States. And you pride yourself in going around the country and setting the bar for transit. But in terms of labor support, now you're talking about going around the country and bringing your labor costs down in terms of health care to the lowest common denominator. And I don't think that's right. I don't think that attitude is one that's healthy for the city of Portland. The other one is, you haven't mentioned your public relations costs, and I know that was covered a couple of years ago in the Oregonian as being, I think, the highest public agency for public relations budgets that you guys have in all of Portland. And I can't see during this crisis why, number one, those fees aren't eliminated, or those costs aren't eliminated. And number two, management costs for any manager making over $100,000, those dollars have to come back to the transit agency. That's way too much money.
Okay, well, I want to thank you for the
call,
comments, and you guys want to respond to that. You overpaid, Mary. Tell the story.
I don't know, 24/7, no pay increases for 4 years. We're paying more for health care. I don't think we're the largest PR group in town, but,
Well, I always have thought, just that there is a tendency in agencies generally to buy the talent that they think they should have and to pay the fees that they think are necessary for that talent. And I also agree with the caller to some extent that sometimes that's not the most reasonable way to approach the problem. It's probably, though, in terms of actual money, more symbolic than significant. I mean, that would be my guess.
It would be small. And, there's just a team of about 3 people that do this work. And, we touch a lot of people.
Well, let's target them.
All right. Yeah.
What positions?
I'll give you the duty pager, and you can answer it 24/7 for a few days, and I think you'll throw it back.
Are you one of the 3?
Yes.
Cool.
Yeah, on call 24/7.
I want to touch on something you said during that phone call, and that is that you sounded as if there's a sense of institutional frustration at TriMet that you can't spend more of your time and resources being a transit agency rather than a healthcare agency. Mm-hmm. And as Joe alluded, that's not your fault.
No, you're right.
That is symptomatic of a much deeper systemic problem we have in this country. Mm-hmm. If we had a single-payer, nationally run healthcare system, we would not be having this conversation about fare reductions and service cuts, I think.
Correct.
So to one extent, I sympathize, but something the caller said resonated with me as well. Really, through no fault of your own, you're joining this national trend in a sort of race to the bottom, in which everybody's health care benefits are being there's an attempt to bring those into parity, but it's a descent. It's a descent to a lower level of service. It's a revocation of benefits that people have enjoyed for a long time. And he's right. That is absolutely wrong. That's something that I think we as a society need to resist. And unfortunately, because we have an employer-based for-profit healthcare system, it puts agencies like TriMet, which are otherwise doing a wonderful job serving the public, into this position where you've got to make trade-offs between what you're supposed to do and your obligation to your employees. And I'm saying, and I know you probably you have no recourse, but that's a position you shouldn't be in.
Wouldn't it be nice if this national issue that it's been on the table for a few years? I mean, that I think was the hope when Obama came in, right? He's like, I'm going to fix healthcare, right? And it's a very complicated thing to fix. I think everyone so. I think I've said all I can say on that one.
Well,
I can't fix healthcare.
To fix healthcare. But what I'm saying is, I think that I sympathize. That's a frustrating position, one that you shouldn't be in.
I want to throw something else out, and I know we have callers who are anxious to get on, and we only have a short amount of time, but I'm going to do it anyway. I really see the role both of the trolleys, and I want to be clear that I understand trolleys are a city operation, but you're going to be putting the crews in and some of the maintenance.
And you mean the streetcar, not your idea?
No, not my. There is confusion. Yeah, streetcars.
Streetcars.
And in addition, of course, you have the Max. Now, I think that Max and certainly the streetcars, really function as part of a planning agency for the development of the communities. They really are, and I've heard this about the MAX lines, particularly the interstate line and the Gresham line, as it turned out, and so on, that these are marvelous opportunities to boost land values, to create population density, which is a desirable thing. Almost everyone agrees on that. But those are all functions that have nothing to do with transportation per se, and have a lot to do with development and planning. And that seems to be a central role that's unspoken of by TriMet, and I wonder if you had a comment on that.
Well, I think we're very clear about it, that it's not just about getting somebody from point A to point B. It's really that land use around it. So even the Federal Transit Administration has adopted many years ago our approach to developing rail systems, that you actually have to have the land use goals in place, because it's not just about, I remember a few years back somebody called me from, I think, Florida, and said, hey, we have this abandoned railroad track. Would that make a good light rail track? I mean, I don't know if he knew he was talking to the PR person, but I thought, well, you know what? I hang out with planners some, and I could try. And I said, well,
sure, go for it.
Sure, go for it. Yeah, I'm in Oregon.
Yeah, why not?
Yeah, I don't know if I'm ever going to get down there and ride it, but I said to him, well, where are you connecting to, right? What are you creating? And if there's nothing there now, what are you planning, right? Because you have to have it hand in hand with development. Now, when you think about the Portland-Milwaukee Light Rail Line, when you think about South Waterfront, right, you have the new OUS building from OHSU. You have the expanded streetcar, the double tracking in that area and such. You have the tram, of course. You have the light rail coming in. You think about that whole innovation quadrant. It's an amazing thing that transit can leverage to create fabulous developments in neighborhoods. People want to have the option of not having to drive to, go to everything they want. So you create these livable communities. I think that's a benefit of the of what light rail brings to the table.
Okay. All right, let's take care of a little biz.
Okay, we're going to go to a little biz, and then we're going to take some calls. So you callers, hang in there now.
All right, this is the Abe and Joe Talk Radio program on KBOO 90.7. Coming up this morning at 9, Alternative Radio features a Black History Month special featuring activist Bobby Seale on the Black Panther Party. Seale is a co-founder of the party.
Well, that's good.
Yeah, it is good.
That's good.
At 10, Chris Andre hosts Air Cascadia, headlines, interviews, and commentary. At 10:15 on Flashpoints, we'll hear an extended conversation with Tikkun magazine founder Rabbi Michael Lerner.
I know Rabbi.
Really?
I know Michael Lerner.
And Gilad Otzman, author of The Wandering Who. And we'll speak to Patrick Coburn, of the Independent of London on the situation in Syria.
And I know him too. Syria. Hey, what is this? I know all these famous people.
It's the Joe Club.
Touch me. Wow.
At 11, you're a strange man.
At
11 on stage and studio, Black History Month documentary, Our Fathers Who Aren't in Heaven, produced by Michael Johnson. And at 11:30 on Art Focus, guest host Wendy Webb interviews Stephanie Snyder, curator and director of the Cooley Gallery at Reed College, about the current exhibit, Bruce Nauman Basements. Thank you, KBOO members, for your generous support in our recent membership drive. We really appreciate it. If you didn't call up to become a member of KBOO, shame on you. You can still do it at www.kboo.fm. Click on the tip jar, make a contribution, help make community radio work. As I said, my name is Abe. That's Joe. This is the Abe and Joe Talk Radio program. We're joined in studio by Mary and Carrie from TriMet. We are taking your calls at 231-8187. We're taking your emails also at Joe and Abe at yahoo.com.
Oh, yes. And why don't we take a call?
Yes.
Brian, you're on the air.
Hey, good morning.
Good morning.
Hey, listen, I have some rhetorical questions as usual.
Wait a minute, rhetorical questions.
Well,
how can we answer rhetorical?
I don't know, but you can try.
Okay.
Well,
make it quick, man.
They're of a very opinionated nature.
Okay, go for it.
So listen, this is it. My salary hasn't gone up in years. But the bus fare keeps going up.
Okay.
I can literally not afford to ride the bus anymore. I've limited my transportation outside the city and all that.
Okay.
Okay. So, that's what it's done. Number two, this system is not working, and you can, lay the blame, and it's
Well, wait a minute. Now, I got to stop you right there. Yeah. This system is not working means specifically
it's not working for the general population. It's not working.
So you're asserting that it just doesn't work for working people.
It's not working for working poor. We all have to limit our trips So we're not riding as much. It's it's on, like the other guy said, a self-destruct mode. It's deteriorating, and it's deteriorating, and the rates keep raising, just like most systems happening in the United States.
Okay.
And my final point is if this system is so great and it's worked so well, and we just need to tweak it and adjust it and raise the rates, how come there's 3 people working in public relations who have to answer a phone 24/7? That's a rhetorical question. I already know, because the service is deteriorating, and the system is deteriorating, and the prices are going up, and pretty soon it's just going to be another thing. It's like, well, if you can afford to go to work, then you'll have the luxury of having it. But don't expect a raising your wages, but expect raises in basic transportation, which I think is a right. Have a nice day.
Okay, thanks for the call. So do you guys want to comment on that?
Well, I guess when I think about the, administrative employees we've have roughly 200 fewer employers in the agency than we used to have. So we're doing more with less. And administrative employees have had wage freezes for 4 years, and they're paying more for the health care. So we understand having to pay more for things. When you also balance what's fuel costs happening. When you see these amazing prices in just 2 weeks, the volatility is just amazing when you watch this. You're wondering who's behind this, because it's just this wild, ride.
The name Coke springs to mind.
Yeah.
But never mind.
Yeah. So it's something that our transportation costs are going up, whether you're on the transit system, whether you're driving a car. Our transportation costs are going up.
I think we should put something on the table here. And when people consider the budget crunch at TriMet, it's a legitimate question to ask, well, what about things like executive compensation? What about things like a large PR staff? Those are legitimate questions, but sure. I think people should bear in mind that we're talking about a public sector agency here and not a large corporation. We're not looking, for example, at AT&T simultaneously laying off thousands of employees and recording record profits and paying record bonuses. That's not the sort of situation we have here. Even, I'm guessing, slashing executive salaries would not go a great distance towards closing this budget gap.
Correct.
Not a lot of fat here.
That's right. When you think about, we have roughly 2,500 employees, and less than 400 are non-union. So it's about 86% or something like that is union employees. So it's a very lean, mean operation. I mean, Carrie and her folks are looking at every route. The wonderful thing about TriMet is also that we have data on every line, every stop. So we have 6,800 bus stops. Carrie knows how many people get on or off at any particular one. So when we think about that tough thing, which is cutting service, which is the last thing we want to do, we look surgically at what's happening on that line at any particular time of day to know where's the least impact to our riders, but that could also help if we reduce that to be able to still provide some service, but help us with the budget shortfall.
But all of this that we're talking about really is, and I think somebody used the term earlier, it is a race to the bottom. I mean, it's not possible to provide the kind of service that I might fantasize, and the reasons why I would like that is I really would like to get people out of automobiles. I think it's a stupid mode of transportation for ordinary in-city or in urban area transportation. It doesn't make real sense, but it's obviously very popular and very comfortable. But in order to get people out of those cars, it's got to be clearly affordable, it's got to be clearly comfortable, it's got to be really safe, and it's got to be reasonably fast. And a lot of those criteria from the point of view of ordinary folks in ordinary situations simply, I don't know if they ever can be met, but are not being met. So what does that imply? We have to wait till fuel costs become so large on the individual transportation that people will bite the bullet and use the system. And then they discover that the buses are going to be half an hour, 45 minutes apart. Whoa. I mean, that's a heck of a blow.
Not to say anything against Carrie, but you've got some ideas about a planner. I mean, if you have some good ideas about service. You're right. The number one thing that people choose when they, rely on transit is the reliability, the frequency and the reliability.
Yeah.
And obviously, half-hour service, not so great.
Well, it's okay at 2 in the morning. It's just really not okay at 3 in the afternoon.
Absolutely. We totally agree. So I think once we get our cost structure in a sustainable fashion, and it's not a race to the bottom, it's a race to come in line. So once we get our cost structure and union contract, it's a solid contract, and solid benefits, we can look at how do we restore service, because that's really the key of what we want to do. The frequent service bus lines, those 12 lines, that are the workhorse of the bus system. They carry more riders than the rest of the bus system. So it's a very efficient system, and it's well ridden. So we'd like to see that as the first priority coming back.
We've got an email. Miss Beach writes in to ask, those of us who ride by choice will abandon our use of TriMet as frequency decreases and fares go up. There is a tipping point that you seem to ignore. I prefer to ride Max go downtown, but as the trains run so infrequently now at night, I am less inclined to use it, especially in the cold months. Do you consider how people react to what you do?
Yes. We know that when fares go up or we cut service even a little, excuse me, that there is an impact to ridership. We know. And it's this tough choice of we don't have many options to cover a budget shortfall at the same time. What we heard from those 4,800 people who commented on the online survey about, give us your thoughts about this budget challenge we face. And there was this tolerance. Now I use that word as our general manager says very carefully. They said there's a tolerance for fare increases rather than service cuts, because they want to make sure they can get where they want to go. Yes, it may cost a little more, but they still want the service. They still want that connection. So that has been the focus of what people have said.
Well, has anybody sat down and calculated, and I know it's not an easy calculation, but it's surely doable, what the impact would be if you did the $2.50 fare and do away with the fare zones, which I think is a good idea, but didn't argue that it had to be one way. It simply said, okay, you've got 2 hours for $2.50. Spend it, use it any way you want. Or I'm saying 2 hours arbitrarily, but you get the idea.
Yeah, they did do the calculation. It's roughly 9 million, that kind of range. And I don't know what the impact would be if you said the 2 hour trip could be any direction you wanted, right? It could be round trip. So I don't know. Obviously, that would be lower.
I'm not sure it would have that much. I know it would lower the amount you'd get, but I'm not sure it would be that much. I think it's just, if you're going to be doing something that's a fundamental, and I would call it fairly radical change, and I'm for that. I think it is really an anachronism, given the shifts in population, to use this hub model. If you're going to do that, why say you have to be going anywhere? You get to use it. It's just a system. You're buying your rent. It's your rent on the system for this period of time. And you could say it was 2 hours. You could say it was 3 hours. You'd have to calculate that. But
so it's so it would be a flat fare. Eliminate the zones,
right?
Which are pretty confusing, I have to tell you.
Oh, they are.
Oh. Yeah, they don't make much sense. And then at some point you could then move toward an electronic fare system down the road as you get more. When you think about the bus transfer,
it's absurd.
Thank you. That's a nice word to say.
I mean, it's
19th century.
Exactly, it's 19th
technology.
century model, and it doesn't make any sense, and it distracts the bus driver.
Well, I like hearing about the zone changes in Spanish, though. That's kind of cool.
My Spanish is so bad. I've heard it 1,000 times, and I still can't repeat it.
Well.
So anyway, I think what the point is that a flat fare, get to an electronic fare, certainly would help streamline. We've gone to other transit districts in the country and saying, how's your electronic system? And they said, don't make it complicated. Streamline it, make it simple. Don't make it ask too much. So
I think that the single fare really makes sense.
Yeah.
And I also think, by the way, that the enforcement, in my experience on the lines, there seems to be a poor socialization in terms of how to behave when you're riding in public transportation. And I think that's a trainable thing. And I think that if you have adequate, I don't know what else to call it, but law enforcement.
Or presence of some sort.
Of some sort that really is authoritative, not authoritarian, but authoritative, you're going to see a change in that behavior. I have seen people be frightened on the trains. And I once actually interfered, and 2 guys were drunk, and they were talking nasty and loud. And I'm the sort of foolish person who will say, hey, tone it down. mind your mouth. And everybody else was, they were so pleased. Well, people are not comfortable doing that, and I'll tell you, that could have gone terribly wrong for me, right? I mean, here's a knife, here's a gun, here's a guy who wants to club me. And I don't like to do that. So we really need to have a sense of security and safety in the system. We designed the system, unlike the metro or the New York subways or whatever, so that anybody can get on any time. Okay, well, the cost of that, in terms of people feeling safe, has got to be enforcement.
Yes.
And I think, by the way, the max free line is in terms of that issue of enforcement, you'd still have to have heavy enforcement. I think you should keep the free and then absolutely enforce at Lloyd Center, for example. From then on, I would be merciless.
Let's go to the phones.
Okay.
Who's next? Peter, good morning.
Hi.
Hi.
I wanted to bring up healthcare again, if I could, because I don't think it's quite as complicated as it was being suggested
go for
a while ago. I mean, there is a very simple solution. We just do it the same way they do it pretty much everywhere else in every other industrialized country. We just have it publicly funded. There was an opportunity, I think, for TriMet to weigh in on this. There was a bill before the state legislature that Michael Dembrow introduced back in March of last year, and I think he intends to reintroduce it in 2013. Which would have established a state system comparable to what they tried to get in California.
I don't think you can hold TriMet responsible for the lack of a single-payer health care.
I'll tell you what TriMet could have done. They could have done what a lot of school boards in California did a few years ago. They actually joined with the Classified School Employees Union in lobbying for a single-payer bill in California, and it passed the state legislature twice. Unfortunately, Governor Schwarzenegger vetoed it. But I think TriMet and the transit union both missed an opportunity by not going down there and testifying.
I agree with you, by the way. I think it's a valid point.
I hope that this is I don't want to see my service maintained at the expense of somebody else being able to see a doctor when he needs to. And you mentioned the gap between the union and the workers earlier. Honestly, I'm not a member of the transit union, but my suspicion is that if the union made big concessions around those fully paid health benefits, which are supposed to be so outrageous, which were not outrageous, 10 years ago when they were first negotiated. They were quite common. The members would be up in arms about it, because there is no more dangerous threat, I think, to the living standards of working people in this country right now, union and non-union, than the cost of their health benefits. And it's the leading cause of bankruptcy in this country right now, even for people with insurance. So, of course, they're not going to stand for it. Of course, they're going to fight for it. And they deserve support, I think. And what they've got, I think everybody should have. And as far as TriMet is concerned, instead of butting heads with the union about this, why don't you guys make common cause and start speaking out publicly for the need for a publicly funded health care system?
Hey, very good question. Thank you for the call. You guys have a comment on that?
Well, I think that's a broader discussion. I think right now we're in this process of interest arbitration. Right now, police and fire and bus operators are treated the same. That they are part of interest arbitration, where a third party decides which package to go with. So, sort of, it's a different process. This is the first time we've been in this.
But I think the caller's making a larger point that I think is valid, whether or not TriMet can at this moment respond to it. I really do think that there has to be a discussion in America that involves agencies as well as citizens, as well as political parties, on the absurdities that we have created for ourselves. It even goes into the question of what happens when you have an automobile accident. In Europe, you have an automobile accident and you're hurt, you get taken care of. In this country, you have to go through a private process involving lawyers, involving insurance companies, involving healthcare providers. It's absurd, and it's expensive, and it doesn't really serve the needs of any of those parties in the long run. So I think while I understand that right now, in the situation you're in, you can't do anything, I certainly would think Michael Dembrow's proposals and others really need support, and I think agency support is not inappropriate.
Certainly something to look into, and I know we're running out of time, and I guess two key points I would make is about all these service cuts and proposals for fare increases. We have a round of public hearings coming up. We're going to have a new proposal based on the public comment we've received so far. So mid-March, we'll have a new proposal come out, and then we have public hearings after that as this process moves down the road. And I think the other thing about the enforcement that you brought up, I really like that word authoritative. We have expanded our fare enforcement, and if people don't have a valid fare, they face a $175 citation or even exclusion from the system. And when you think about if I've paid my fare, I want the person sitting next to me to know that they've paid their fare. And we've expanded the number of fare enforcers. I think that brings that sense of authoritativeness to the system. Checking fares, riders are saying, thank you, we're glad to see somebody on the system. And in next year's budget, even though things are very tight, that integrity of the system is so important that we're looking at how can we add even more fare enforcement to the system that also help deal with that sense of safety and security. So
I've certainly noticed it. I was at the Hollywood Transit Center about to board a MAX just a couple of weeks ago. I came at the bottom of the staircase where a couple of enforcement officers checking everybody's fare before they even stepped onto the platform.
Yeah.
I had never seen that sort of presence before.
And, you know, that is a design issue. When you think about downtown Portland, we share the sidewalk. So it's really difficult. Let's say that was a fare zone and not the free rail zone. It would be difficult to know where's the platform versus where's the sidewalk, right? But in these areas like the 42nd Avenue where you have your separate right-of-way, that you have to buy your ticket upstairs, and as you walk down the stairs, you're now in the fare zone. So you don't have to wait until you get on the train to check someone's fare. So you really have this interaction quite early. It sends a very strong message, you know. So I've been on a few of those missions, and it's really telling. I always love seeing the people walking down the stairs, and they see the fare inspector, and then they turn around, they go back up, and they go buy a fare, you know. So it's, I think the message is getting out. You have to have your fare. It's the right thing to do. And, you know, or else you face a very expensive fine.
No, I'm just kind of winding up, but I want to emphasize some of the things I brought up. I think that people who are less fortunate, people who are handicapped, students who really do have limited incomes, shouldn't face harsher, higher fares. I just think that's very unfair and very unfortunate. I also think that the idea of just having a 2-hour or 3-hour specific $2.50 fare makes real sense, rather than worrying about whether someone's going out or in a hub system, which really, the whole hub thing, I don't want to get into that, but you know, and I also am concerned with keeping the fareless square, or whatever it's called now, the free train zone,
Free rail zone.
Free rail zone. I think there's a lot of advantage to the merchant class in the city with that, and also to the hospitality industry. And I would be worried if that was knocked out.
Well, I think there's two things. Obviously, when you have a convention center on the east side of the river, and most of the hotels on the west side of the river, we would work with Travel Portland to create a pass so that conventioneers can
So as they
travel.
register, you just have
Something,
a pass?
yeah, something. So basically, you can support those jobs that are so critical to the local economy while also supporting that. We also have an elderly and special pass downtown that we have. Once it moved to the free rail zone, we would expand that as well. So people with disabilities and the elderly would still be able to have a very low-cost transportation option.
We're out of time.
We are.
I want to thank you both for being here, and I want to thank our listeners for listening.
One more question. If people want to find out more about those public hearings, where can they do so?
TriMet.org.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.